Hey there, dirt bike people. I'm Chuck from TrueTech, and today I'm going to be disassembling the cases on this 2006 YZ250. If you're looking for the top end or the right side disassembly, you can find it in the playlist. To get things started, you can watch me struggle with these case bolts. For some reason, Yamaha decided to use Allen bolts, so you got to make sure that there's no dirt in them and that you have a nice sharp Allen. My electric impact didn't even come close to pulling these suckers out. They were way too tight. And normally I pull the right side case off first because it doesn't require the use of a puller. But in this case, the right side crank bearing was seized onto the crank, so I had to do it this way. Really, it's not a bad thing because I should show you how to do it the technically correct way. But in the near future, I do hope to do a video on crank bearing theory that explains how cranks are kept from spinning inside their bearings. It's a pretty cool topic. So at this point, I've got my puller set up and I'm putting a little bit of pressure on the crank. One of the major disadvantages of using a crank puller like this is it's really hard to feel what's going on with the cases. Make extra sure that all the case bolts are out and don't put too much pressure on it. It's a good idea to have a dead blow hammer around, and sometimes that can just knock some things loose and the cases will come apart much easier. Here you can see that I had some tension on the puller, and when I hit it with the dead blow, the glue came loose and things started to move. I sped this clip way up so you could see how gradually I move the cases apart. As the cases come further apart, the point that's resisting often changes. This countershaft collar was very difficult to get out, and that's a very common issue because the YZ uses an O-ring in a groove. Here I'm actually using a steel ball peen hammer to vibrate this thing through because it's very badly stuck in the collar. Do this at your own risk. You risk breaking transmission parts if you're not careful. This engine is a pretty extreme example. This was seized really bad, and the right side crank bearing also totally seized. Be patient and pay attention to what's hanging up. If you got a tough one like this one and you need to take a step away, go ahead and do it or you're going to break something. Ask me how I know. Eventually, if you're methodical about your approach, everything will let loose and it'll come apart. Now that the transmission shaft is out of here, we can grab a screwdriver and pull this collar out. Now it's time to take the transmission apart. YZ transmissions are especially a pain because the shift forks don't slide on the shafts. A lot of guys take the whole transmission out as an assembly. Normally I like to pull the shift forks and the shift drum out first, but in this case the shift forks were so bent that the whole thing just came out as an assembly. Now as soon as you can lay that transmission down, you want to go back to the case and make sure that no washers are stuck to the bearings. If you find any, just pull them out and put them back onto the shaft where they belong. The two shafts are different diameters, so it's hard to mix them up. The first place to look for transmission issues is on the shift forks. 9 bad transmissions out of 10, you'll find shift forks that are burnished and worn out at the ends. In this one, however, there was a piece of metal that went through it from somewhere and it just ground everything up. If you get any burnishing or wear marks at all on your shift forks, have a look at the gear dogs and make sure that they're not starting to wear. It's no fun to put your engine all the way back together and then have it jump out of gear. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this crank should not be stuck in the right-hand case half. In this case, I actually forced the crank out with the press, but that's pretty extreme. Usually you can just pull it out by hand, or worst case scenario, push it out with your crank puller. If you want more videos like this, you know what to do.